Hey everybody, Mr. Face here. Thank you so much for subscribing to the new channel, and I really hope you guys liked the first creepypasta I uploaded. If you wanted to see that, I'll drop a link in the description. But, for now, let's go on to a scarier story. Tonight's tale is Blackwater Park.
If you drive along Hilk's Brow in northwest England, near Logill, on the winter solstice after dark, you may come across something quite peculiar. Rusted iron gates with peeling black paint and a sign that is said to read, in faded, near illegible font, Blackwater Park, closed. Many unsuspecting motorists would simply drive past the beaten, unremarkable entrance without a second glance. But if you know what you're looking for, with a certain amount of luck, you'll come across it. Accounts of the gate are few and far between, and accounts of what lies behind are even fewer, and this made finding information concerning it near impossible. After careful deliberation, I reluctantly decided to go there myself and get a first-hand experience of this place. When the day came, December 21st, 2004, the weather wasn't ideal. Thick fog and low temperatures, ever so slight rain. The kind that gets you drenched without you even realizing. I drove along the road at a moderate speed, around 640, and it wasn't even pitch black yet. There was a dim glow over the horizon, but I thought it qualified as after dark. After around 15 minutes of carefully watching the side of the road for an opening between the tall trees, my heart jumped. There it was. As described in the stories I'd read, it was a set of black iron gates, with no distinguishing features to them, apart from the sign that read, Blackwater Park, closed. Due to the fog, you couldn't see very far past the gate. Apart from that, there was a small bridge over the murky, still water, the surface disturbed only by the light rain. The gates weren't locked. They only took a slight push to swing open. Creaking eerily as I stepped past the opening into the park, I felt a slight chilling breeze that made me shiver momentarily. I walked slowly down the thin dirt trail that made a path between the tall dead grass. I came to the bridge I could see from outside the gate. It was made of thin planks covered in a grayish, stagnant water. I trotted carefully over the bridge, hoping that the wood wouldn't snap under my weight and send me plunging into the cold depths. Fortunately, I made it over the bridge and stepped back on the dirt path that then led on to a section of trees. I decided to walk on, my pulse ever so slightly rising. The only sound I could hear was my footsteps on the dirt, and every so often the rustle or a cracking sound from the dead trees within the park, which every once in a while would make me involuntarily jolt. After a minute or two of walking through the woodland, I heard the rain increase intensely. Its hiss against the thick canopy above grew louder. I felt and heard heavy drips hit the semi-damp earth I was walking on. I put my hood up and walked on. The sound of rain relieved me. It eased the tension a little bit, as the deathly silence was making me slightly uncomfortable. The darkness had descended completely upon me by now, but thankfully my eyes had adjusted so I could see the path in front of me, now an ever-narrowing trail through the tall, thin fir trees. I felt a hint of dread in the pit of my stomach, but I dismissed it as irrational fear. I continued to walk through the trees until I stopped dead in my tracks and squinted hard. There appeared to be a small wooden cabin 10 to 15 meters in front of me. As I realized this, my eyes widened and the feeling of dread returned, dramatically so. As I felt myself start to breathe heavily, I started to shake slightly. Thoughts immediately rushed to my mind that I should turn back and go home. But in my panicked state, I had lost sight of the path I was walking on. The rain and wind had stopped and the silence had returned. Total silence. I could hear my heartbeat pulsing in my temples. I could hear every intake and expulsion of my breath. Disregarding my terror, I forced myself to walk further towards the cabin. I noticed there was a window on the side of its crooked construction. I crept over to it and looked through the dirty pane of glass. A snapping noise behind me made me jump out of my skin, but I realized it was my doing. I had stepped on a brittle object that I couldn't make out in the darkness. I continued to look into the cabin and saw no movement, trying my hardest not to succumb to terror. I stepped carefully over to the unlocked door and twisted its old metal handle. and it creaked open, with what seemed to be a deafening volume compared to the stark silence of the forest in the dark. I carefully put my foot through the threshold and onto the wooden cabin floor. Trying not to make any sound, I slowly moved the rest of my twitching frame through the doorway. I felt my way around the walls, slowly. One half of the room was as bare as I could feel as I began to blindly scan the other half with my cold hands. I felt my fingers brush against something. Something wooden. Something upright. Even though it was likely something perfectly normal, it still further terrified me. I explored this object further with my hands. As soon as I found it was a bed of some kind, as you'd expect in a solitary cabin like this, I shuffled around it, checking the single bed for some kind of presence. There was none. I sat on the bed, soon realizing how exhausted I was. After a minute or two of sitting there motionless, just breathing, I considered simply going to sleep in the lonely cabin. After all, the bed was surprisingly dry and comfortable for somewhere as dilapidated and isolated as this. My thoughts got the better of me, and I slowly brought my legs up onto the mattress, feeling my weight disperse and the pressure on my ankles refrain. As I got comfortable lying on my back, my eyes adjusted to the inky blackness. I looked at the end of the bed. There, in the corner, I saw a pale, tall, bony figure staring at me.